When Dad chose his mistress over walking me down the aisle, I thought I had hit rock bottom. 3 years of radio silence, missed birthdays, and a father who acted like I had died. But when my boutique hotel chain sold for $580 million and hit every major news outlet, my phone buzzed with a text from the man who had abandoned me. "Congratulations, sweetheart. We should talk about the family business." That message would uncover a web of lies that made his wedding betrayal look like child's play. Before we dive into this family revenge story, I would love to know where you are watching from around the world. If this hook already has you questioning everything about family loyalty, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this story gets absolutely wild. Trust me, you will want to see how karma finally catches up to the people who think blood means they can destroy you, and then come crawling back when you succeed. My name is Serafina Blackwood, and I built my empire from nothing while my family watched me struggle and did absolutely nothing to help. When I was 25, fresh out of hospitality management school with student loans that could buy a house, I started with one tiny bed and breakfast in rural Vermont. My dad, Richard Blackwood, owned a construction company that had been in our family for 3 generations. He could have helped me with renovations, connections, anything. Instead, he told me I was wasting my time and that hospitality was not a real business. The wedding disaster happened 2 years ago. I had planned everything around having my father walk me down the aisle. Marcus, my fiancé, and I had sent the invitations 6 months early. Dad had confirmed he would be there. The morning of my wedding, I got a text message. "Something came up with Patricia, cannot make it today, sorry." And Patricia was his secretary turned girlfriend who was 20 years younger than him and had destroyed my parents' marriage. I walked down that aisle alone with every guest staring and whispering. My mother had passed away from cancer 3 years earlier, and my father was all I had left. The humiliation burned deeper than any physical pain I had ever experienced. Marcus and I still got married that day, but the damage was done. Dad had chosen his new woman over his only daughter on the most important day of my life. After the wedding, I threw myself into expanding my business. I bought 2 more properties, renovated them with my own savings and loans, and created a brand focused on sustainable luxury tourism. I worked 18-hour days, learned every aspect of the business from housekeeping to financial management, and slowly built a reputation for creating unique experiences that travelers could not find anywhere else. Meanwhile, Dad never called. Not on my birthday, not on holidays, not even when I sent him photos of my growing success. I tried reaching out twice in those 3 years. The first time Patricia answered his phone and told me he was busy. The second time, he answered and said we should let things cool down, as if I was the one who had done something wrong. Then came the acquisition offer. A major hospitality group had been watching my brand for months. They offered me $580 million for my 5 properties and the rights to expand my concept nationwide. I accepted knowing it would set me up for life and give me the capital to pursue even bigger dreams. The news broke on every business channel and website. 28-year-old entrepreneur sells boutique hotel empire for record-breaking sum. The interviews started immediately. Forbes wanted to feature me. Business Insider called me a visionary. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know how a young woman with no family connections had built something so valuable from scratch. That is when Dad's text arrived. "Congratulations, sweetheart. We should talk about the family business." Family business? What family business? His construction company was barely breaking even, and he had made it clear that I was not welcome in his life anymore. I ignored the text for 3 days, but he kept sending more messages. "This is important, Sarah. There are things you do not know about your mother's will. Your success changes everything about our family's legal situation. Meet me for coffee. You deserve to understand what really happened." The mention of my mother's will made my blood run cold. Mom had died while I was struggling to get my first property running. Dad had handled all the legal matters, telling me that everything went to him as her surviving spouse and that there was nothing for me to worry about. I had been so devastated by grief and so focused on building my business that I had never questioned it. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop downtown. When I arrived, Dad looked older, grayer, but his smile was the same charming one that had fooled everyone for years. He hugged me like nothing had happened, like he had not abandoned me on my wedding day and ignored me for 3 years. "Sarah, you look incredible. Success suits you," he said, and I wanted to throw my coffee in his face. "Cut the act, Dad. What do you want?" I asked. His expression shifted to something more serious. "Your mother left you something in her will, something significant, but there were conditions attached that I had to honor until you achieved a certain level of financial independence." "What are you talking about?" I felt my heart racing. "She left you 51% ownership of Blackwood Construction. She believed that you had the business sense and integrity to run it properly. But she stipulated that you could only inherit it after proving you could build something substantial on your own without any family help." I stared at him in shock. My mother had left me controlling interest in a company worth millions, and he had hidden it from me for years. "That is impossible. You said everything went to you." "I said I would handle everything, and I did. I have been holding your inheritance in trust, waiting for the right moment. Your hotel sale proves you are ready." But something in his eyes told me this was not the whole truth. There was desperation there, a nervous energy that I remembered from childhood when he was hiding something big. My father was a skilled manipulator, and after years of his lies and abandonment, I was not about to trust him now. I excused myself to the bathroom and immediately called my attorney. "I need you to pull my mother's will and any trust documents related to the Blackwood family estate. Something is not right, and I need to know everything within 24 hours. When I returned to the table, Dad was on his phone speaking in hushed, urgent tones. He hung up quickly when he saw me coming back. "Who was that?" I asked. "Just Patricia. She is worried about me." Another lie. I had heard enough of his phone conversations over the years to know his tone when he was talking to Patricia versus when he was talking business. This was definitely business, and it sounded desperate. "I need time to think about this," I told him. "This is a lot to process." "Of course, but Sarah, time is somewhat of an issue here. There are some complications with the company that need to be resolved soon." Red flags were going off in my head like fire alarms. Dad never needed help with anything, and he certainly never admitted to complications. Something was very wrong, and I was determined to find out what he had been hiding about my mother's legacy, and why my success had suddenly made him so desperate to reconnect. My attorney, Jessica Walsh, called me at 6 a.m. the next day. Her voice was tense and professional, but I could hear the anger underneath. "Sarah, you need to come to my office immediately. What I found about your father and your mother's estate is going to change everything." I drove downtown in a daze, my mind racing with possibilities. When I arrived, Jessica had documents spread across her conference table like evidence at a crime scene. "Your father has been lying to you about everything," she said without preamble. "Your mother did leave you 51% of Blackwood Construction, but there was no trust condition about proving yourself financially. That inheritance became yours the day she died 3 years ago." My legs felt weak. Then why would he lie about that? "Because he has been illegally operating as the majority owner and making decisions that have nearly bankrupted the company. Look at this." She handed me a stack of financial records. "He took out massive loans against the company's assets using forged documents that claimed he owned 100% of the shares. He has been paying Patricia a 6-figure salary as a consultant, despite her having no relevant experience. Most importantly, he recently sold off the company's most valuable assets, 3 prime real estate lots, to cover his gambling debts. The room started spinning. Gambling debts. Your father owes over $2 million to various creditors. The sale of those lots bought him time, but the money is almost gone. When your hotel sale hit the news, he panicked. He realizes that if you discover you are the majority owner and audit the company books, he will face criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. I sank into a chair, trying to process the magnitude of his betrayal. So the family business conversation was his attempt to manipulate you into some kind of partnership agreement that would legitimize his actions retroactively and save him from prison. He probably planned to offer you some reduced percentage of ownership in exchange for not pursuing legal action. Jessica pulled out another document. But here is where it gets even worse. I did some digging into the timeline. The company's financial troubles began about 6 months before your wedding. My blood turned to ice. What are you saying? I am saying your father skipped your wedding not because of Patricia, but because he was meeting with loan sharks and trying to cover his gambling losses. Patricia was probably covering for him. He chose his financial crimes over being there for you on the most important day of your life. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. It was not just that he had missed my wedding. He had destroyed my mother's legacy, while I was building my own success, completely unaware that I was the rightful owner of everything he was stealing. There is more, Jessica continued. I contacted the buyers of those real estate lots. They are willing to testify that your father misrepresented his ownership status during the sales. We have grounds for fraud charges, and we can potentially reverse those sales since they were conducted without the majority owner's consent. I thought about all those nights I had worked until dawn, living on instant noodles and coffee, struggling to make my first property profitable while Dad was living comfortably off assets that legally belonged to me. I thought about my mother, who had believed in my business skills enough to leave me controlling interest in the family company, and how Dad had desecrated her memory by stealing from her daughter. What are my options? I asked. We can file criminal charges immediately. The evidence is overwhelming. We can also file civil suits to recover the stolen assets and reverse the fraudulent sales. Given your current financial status from the hotel sale, we have the resources to pursue this aggressively. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city where I had built my empire, while my father built his house of lies. My phone buzzed with another text from him. Have you thought about our conversation? Time is running short for some decisions we need to make. The audacity was breathtaking. He was still trying to manipulate me, still pretending he held all the cards when he was actually facing financial and legal destruction. I want to confront him first, I told Jessica. I want him to know that I know everything before we move forward with charges. Sarah, I would not recommend that. It gives him time to hide assets or flee. He is not going anywhere. His ego is too big, and he thinks he is smarter than everyone else. I want to look him in the eye when I tell him that his victim just became his worst nightmare. Jessica reluctantly agreed, but only if she could monitor the conversation remotely, and only if I wore a recording device. If he admits to any of the fraud on tape, it will make our case ironclad. I texted Dad back. Let us meet tonight. Same coffee shop, 7 o'clock. We need to finish our conversation. His response came back immediately. Perfect. I knew you would see reason. This will be great for both of us. That evening, I arrived early and chose a corner table where Jessica could clearly see us from her car across the street. The recording device was hidden in my jacket, and my phone was set to call 911 with one touch if things went wrong. Dad arrived looking confident and relaxed, carrying a leather briefcase that probably contained whatever fake documents he planned to use to steal more of my inheritance. Sarah, I am so glad you are ready to hear about this family business opportunity, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. Actually, Dad, I am ready to hear about a lot of things, like how you have been stealing from me for 3 years while I was building my business from nothing. His smile faltered slightly. I do not know what you mean. I know about the 51% ownership Mom left me. I know about the forged documents. I know about the gambling debts and the asset sales. I know everything. The color drained from his face, and for the first time in my life, I saw my father look genuinely afraid. Sarah, you do not understand the full situation. I was protecting you from the burden of— Stop lying, I said loud enough that other customers turned to look. You have been stealing from me while I was grieving Mom and trying to survive financially. You missed my wedding because you were meeting with loan sharks. You have been living off my inheritance while watching me struggle. He leaned forward, his voice becoming desperate and angry. You have no idea what you are talking about, little girl. I built that company from nothing, just like my father before me. Your mother had no right to give it away to someone who knows nothing about construction. There it is, I said quietly. The truth about how you really feel about Mom's decision. You think you deserve what she left to me. I spent my whole life building that business while she played housewife. Yes, I think I deserve it more than a spoiled little girl who got lucky with some hotels. The mask had finally come off completely. This was the man who had raised me, who I had loved and respected for 25 years. And he was willing to destroy everything. My mother's memory, my inheritance, my trust, to feed his ego and his gambling addiction. Well, Dad, I said, standing up and gathering my things. You are about to find out exactly what this spoiled little girl can do when someone steals from her family. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of immediately filing criminal charges, I was going to play my father's game better than he ever could. He had taught me to be strategic and ruthless in business. Now I would use those lessons against him. I called Jessica first. I want to buy him out, I announced. What do you mean? You already own 51%. I want to own 100%. I want him to have nothing left of the company my mother trusted me to protect, but I want to do it legally and strategically so he cannot claim I am being vindictive. Jessica was quiet for a moment. That is actually brilliant. If we approach this as a business transaction while quietly building our legal case, we maintain the high ground while gathering even more evidence. My first call was to Marcus, my husband, who was a forensic accountant for a major firm. When I explained everything, he was furious about the betrayal, but excited about the challenge of untangling Dad's financial web. I can trace every fraudulent transaction and build a timeline that will show exactly how he systematically stole from you, Marcus said. But Sarah, are you sure you want to take on running a construction company that is completely different from hospitality? I do not want to run it long term. I want to restore it to what Mom intended it to be, sell it for fair value, and use those proceeds to honor her memory properly. Dad turned our family legacy into his personal piggy bank. I am going to turn it back into something worthy of the Blackwood name. The next ally I recruited was my mother's brother, Uncle David, who had been estranged from Dad since the funeral. When I called and explained what I had discovered, his response was immediate and angry. That son of a bitch, Uncle David said. Your mother specifically told me she was leaving you the company because she was worried about Richard's spending and his relationship with that secretary. She made me promise to watch out for you if anything happened to her, but Richard cut me out completely after the funeral. Would you be willing to testify about Mom's intentions if we need witnesses? I would be willing to do much more than that. Your mother was my best friend before she was Richard's wife. He has disrespected her memory and stolen from her daughter. I want to help you destroy him. Uncle David brought something even more valuable than testimony. He had been in construction his whole life and knew everyone in the industry. Within 2 days, he had connected me with 3 former Blackwood construction employees who had quit because they could not stand watching Dad run the company into the ground. The most important was Maria Santos, who had been the company's head of operations for 15 years before Dad fired her 6 months earlier. When we met for lunch, her story filled in missing pieces of the puzzle. Your father was always difficult, but after your mother died, he completely lost control, Maria explained. He started bringing Patricia to business meetings, giving her access to confidential financial information and making decisions based on her advice, even though she knew nothing about construction. What kind of decisions? He canceled 3 major contracts because Patricia thought they were too much work. He fired our 2 most experienced project managers because Patricia said they were disrespectful to her. But the worst part was the gambling. He would disappear for hours during work days, and when he came back, he would be either euphoric about winning or desperate about losing. Maria pulled out her phone and showed me photos she had taken of company documents. I started documenting everything because I knew someone would need this evidence eventually. I never imagined it would be you fighting to save your own inheritance. The photos showed forged signatures, altered financial statements, and email chains where Dad instructed Patricia to handle transactions she was not legally authorized to manage. It was a treasure trove of evidence that would make Jessica's job much easier. Maria, would you consider coming back to help me restore the company once we resolve the legal issues? I asked. Her face lit up. I have been waiting 3 years for someone to ask me that question. Your mother hired me personally, and I always felt like I was letting her down by not being able to protect what she built. Within a week, I had assembled a team that Dad never saw coming. Jessica was handling the legal strategy. Marcus was conducting a complete forensic audit of all company finances. Uncle David was reaching out to industry contacts to assess the company's current reputation and potential value. Maria was documenting every fraudulent action Dad had taken and identifying which former employees might be willing to return under new management. But I needed one more element to make my plan work perfectly: inside information about Dad's current activities and financial status. That is where Patricia unknowingly became my greatest asset. I called Dad and told him I wanted to schedule a formal meeting to discuss the partnership he had proposed. But I want to do this properly with lawyers and financial advisors present. Can you have your people prepare a comprehensive presentation about the company's current status and future projections? Dad was thrilled. He thought I was walking into his trap, ready to accept whatever reduced ownership percentage he planned to offer. Of course, sweetheart. Patricia has been working on exactly that kind of presentation. She really understands the business now. Perfect. Patricia would be doing most of the work, which meant she would have to gather all the financial documents and legal papers that I needed to see. And since she was not legally trained, she might accidentally include evidence of her own involvement in the fraudulent activities. The meeting was scheduled for the following Friday at Dad's office. I told him I would be bringing my own legal and financial advisors, which he interpreted as normal due diligence rather than preparation for a hostile takeover. Meanwhile, Jessica had been busy filing preliminary paperwork that would freeze Dad's ability to sell any more company assets or take on additional debt. She did this quietly through emergency court orders that would not be served until after our Friday meeting. If Dad tried to liquidate anything else after realizing I knew about his crimes, he would find himself facing immediate contempt of court charges in addition to everything else. Marcus had traced the gambling debts to 3 different creditors, including one with connections to organized crime. Sarah, your father is not just stealing from you to fund a gambling habit. He owes money to people who break legs when they do not get paid. That might explain why he has been so desperate to resolve this quickly. This information changed my strategy completely. If Dad was in danger from loan sharks, I could not just humiliate him and walk away. Despite everything he had done to me, I did not want him to be physically harmed. But I also was not going to let fear of his creditors stop me from reclaiming what was rightfully mine. We need to move faster, I told my team. If he owes money to dangerous people, they might try to seize company assets before we can secure them legally. Jessica filed additional papers to establish my majority ownership officially and to request immediate injunctions against any asset transfers. Uncle David contacted a security firm that specialized in protecting businesses during ownership disputes. Maria began reaching out to current employees to gauge their loyalty and willingness to continue working during a transition period. By Thursday night, everything was in place. I had evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. I had a team ready to take over operations immediately. I had legal protection against further asset stripping. Most importantly, I had the moral authority of being the rightful owner trying to restore my mother's legacy. Dad had no idea that his spoiled little girl was about to become his worst nightmare. The Friday meeting would be his last chance to confess everything and accept a reasonable settlement. If he continued lying and trying to manipulate me, I was prepared to destroy him completely. But first, I needed to see just how deep his betrayal really went, and whether Patricia was a willing accomplice or another one of his victims. That answer would determine whether I showed mercy or delivered the full force of the justice that my mother's memory deserved. The war for Blackwood Construction was about to begin, and I intended to win it decisively. The Friday meeting arrived, and I felt confident walking into Dad's office with Jessica and Marcus by my side. Patricia had prepared an elaborate presentation complete with charts and projections that painted Blackwood Construction as a thriving family business ready for expansion with the right partnership. Dad looked relaxed and confident as he welcomed us into the conference room. "Sarah, I am so excited to finally bring you into the family business properly. Your mother would be so proud to see us working together." The irony of him invoking my mother's memory while sitting next to stolen financial documents made my stomach turn, but I maintained my composure. Patricia began her presentation, and within minutes I realized she knew exactly what she was doing. This was not an innocent secretary being manipulated by my father. This was a calculated partner in crime. "As you can see from these projections," Patricia said with practiced confidence, "the company is positioned for significant growth. We have streamlined operations and eliminated unnecessary overhead costs." Those unnecessary overhead costs were the experienced employees Dad had fired. The streamlined operations meant cutting corners on safety and quality to maximize profits. Everything she was presenting was built on the foundation of stolen assets and fraudulent accounting. But then something unexpected happened. Marcus leaned over and whispered urgently in my ear. "The numbers do not match what I found in my audit. She is using completely different financial records." I felt a chill run down my spine. How could there be two sets of books unless someone had tipped them off about our investigation? During a break in the presentation, Jessica stepped outside to take a call. When she returned, her face was pale and her hands were shaking slightly. "Sarah, we need to talk privately," she said. We excused ourselves to the hallway where Jessica delivered news that shattered everything I thought I knew about my team. "Uncle David called the office this morning asking detailed questions about our legal strategy and timeline for filing charges," she said quietly. My paralegal thought it was odd since we had already briefed him on everything. When she pressed him for clarification, he hung up. My blood turned to ice. "What are you saying?" "I think your uncle has been feeding information to your father. The timing of your dad's confidence, Patricia's alternative financial records, the fact that they seem prepared for our legal challenges. It all makes sense if someone has been telling them our moves in advance." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Uncle David was my mother's brother, the person who had promised to protect me, the ally I had trusted most completely. He had access to every detail of our strategy, every piece of evidence we had gathered, every legal filing we had prepared. "But why would he do this?" I asked, trying to process the magnitude of this betrayal. Jessica pulled out her phone and showed me a text message she had received from her private investigator. "I had someone look into your uncle's finances after his call seemed suspicious. He owes your father money. A lot of money. Apparently, David invested heavily in a construction project that your father was managing 2 years ago. When the project failed due to your father's mismanagement, David lost his life savings." The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. Uncle David was not helping me out of loyalty to my mother's memory. He was working with Dad to manipulate me into a settlement that would keep the company afloat long enough for both of them to recover their losses. I was not David's niece seeking justice. I was his meal ticket. "How much does he know about our plans?" I asked. "Everything. The forensic audit results, the evidence Maria provided, our legal filing timeline, even the emergency injunctions I prepared. If he has told your father all of this, then Dad knows I am not here to negotiate. He knows I am here to destroy him." We walked back into the conference room, and I could see the change immediately. Dad's relaxed confidence had been replaced by something harder and more desperate. Patricia was no longer presenting. She was watching me with the calculating eyes of someone who knew they were in a fight for survival. "Sarah," Dad said, his voice taking on a tone I remembered from childhood arguments. "I think we need to be more direct about our expectations for this partnership." "What kind of expectations?" I asked, even though I already knew this conversation was about to become ugly. "The kind where you understand that some family secrets need to stay in the family. Your Uncle David has helped me understand that you have been asking a lot of questions about things that happened during a very difficult time for all of us." There it was, the threat wrapped in concern. He knew I had discovered his crimes, and he was prepared to use Uncle David's betrayal as leverage. "Patricia has prepared a settlement agreement." Dad continued, sliding a document across the table. "It acknowledges your inheritance of 25% ownership in exchange for dropping any legal challenges to decisions made during the transition period after your mother's death. 25%. He was offering me half of what I legally owned in exchange for allowing him to keep the proceeds of 3 years of theft and fraud." "And if I do not agree to this settlement?" I asked. Dad's expression turned cold in a way that reminded me exactly why I had spent my childhood walking on eggshells around him. "Then David and I will be forced to present evidence that you have been engaged in extortion and harassment of a grieving widower. We have recordings of you making threats, documentation of your attempts to steal company property, and witness testimony about your unstable behavior since your mother's death." My hands started shaking with rage. Not only had Uncle David betrayed my trust and fed them information, he had helped them build a case to frame me as the criminal in this situation. "You have recordings?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "David has been very thorough in documenting your increasingly erratic behavior and unrealistic demands," Patricia said with a smile that made me want to leap across the table. Jessica squeezed my arm under the table, reminding me to stay calm and not give them any additional ammunition. But the reality of the situation was overwhelming. My own uncle had not just betrayed me. He had actively helped my father build a defense against the very crimes I was trying to expose. "I need time to review this settlement offer with my advisors," I said, standing to leave. "Of course," Dad replied, his confidence fully restored. "But do not take too long, sweetheart. David mentioned that you have been under a lot of stress lately. We would hate for this family disagreement to affect your mental health or your new business ventures." Another threat. He was making it clear that if I did not accept his terms, he would try to destroy my reputation and potentially my ability to operate in any business environment. As we walked to our cars, I realized that everything I thought I knew about family loyalty and justice had been an illusion. The people I trusted most had been playing a completely different game, and I was losing badly. But I had not built a multi-million-dollar business empire by giving up when things got difficult. If Dad and Uncle David thought they had won by turning my own family against me, they were about to learn that they had just made their biggest mistake yet. That night, sitting in my kitchen with Marcus and Jessica, I felt like my world had completely collapsed. The betrayal by Uncle David hurt worse than anything Dad had done, because I had trusted him with my mother's memory and my deepest pain about family loyalty. "We need to assume they know everything we have planned," Jessica said grimly. David had access to all our evidence, our legal strategy, even our timeline for filing charges. We have to start over with a completely new approach. Maybe we should take the settlement, Marcus suggested quietly. 25% of something is better than 100% of nothing, and if they are prepared to frame you for extortion— No, I said firmly. I am not letting them win by intimidating me. My mother trusted me with that company, and I am not going to let them steal it just because they are willing to lie better than I am willing to fight. That is when my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. Is this Seraphina Blackwood? The voice was elderly female and carried an authority that made me sit up straight. Yes, who is this? My name is Eleanor Martinez. I was your mother's attorney before she passed away. I have been following the news about your business success, and I believe we need to meet immediately. My heart started racing. Mom had never mentioned having a separate attorney from the family lawyer who had handled her will. I do not understand. My father said he handled all of Mom's legal affairs. Your father handled some of your mother's affairs, but not all of them. There are documents he does not know exist, and based on what I have been hearing through professional channels about disputes regarding Blackwood Construction, I believe you need to see them tonight. Eleanor agreed to meet us at Jessica's office within the hour. When she arrived, she was a woman in her 70s with silver hair and the sharp eyes of someone who had been practicing law since before I was born. She carried a leather briefcase that looked like it had been through decades of important meetings. Your mother came to see me 6 months before she passed away. Eleanor began without preamble. She was concerned about your father's gambling and his relationship with his secretary. She wanted to protect your inheritance in ways that the family attorney could not or would not handle. Eleanor opened her briefcase and pulled out documents that made Jessica gasp audibly. Your mother created a separate trust that your father knows nothing about. She transferred several personal assets into this trust with very specific instructions about when and how you could access them. The first document was a deed showing that Mom had secretly purchased a small office building downtown, using money from her personal inheritance from her parents. The building was currently leased to several small businesses and generating steady rental income. But more importantly, Eleanor continued, your mother asked me to investigate your father's business activities. She suspected he was gambling with company money and potentially engaging in fraudulent practices. I hired a private investigator who documented everything. She handed me a thick folder marked, Confidential Investigation, Richard Blackwood. Inside were photographs, bank statements, casino records, and loan documents dating back 4 years before Mom's death. Your mother knew your father was stealing from the company long before she got sick, Eleanor explained. She gathered evidence but decided not to confront him because she was afraid it would interfere with her cancer treatment and your education. Instead, she created a legal safety net for you. Jessica was frantically reading through the documents. These bank statements show transfers of company funds to personal gambling accounts going back 5 years. This is systematic embezzlement, not recent desperation. But the most important document was at the bottom of the folder. A notarized statement from Mom dated just 2 weeks before she passed away. If my daughter ever needs to prove that Richard has been stealing from Blackwood Construction, she has my permission to use all evidence in this file. I pray she never needs to see this, but I cannot let him destroy what my family built if he continues down this path. Tears were streaming down my face as I read my mother's words. She had known exactly what kind of man Dad was, and she had protected me even while she was dying. There is one more thing, Eleanor said gently. Your mother left specific instructions about your Uncle David. My blood ran cold. What about him? She suspected he was financially dependent on your father and warned me never to trust him with information about your inheritance. She specifically wrote that David had always been jealous of your father's success and might be willing to betray family if it served his financial interests. Even from her deathbed, my mother had been protecting me from betrayals, I could never have imagined. "Why did you wait until now to contact me?" I asked. "Your mother's instructions were very specific. I was only supposed to reveal these documents if you achieved significant business success on your own, and if there was evidence that Richard was trying to steal your inheritance. Your hotel sale and the rumors about family legal disputes told me it was time." Eleanor pulled out one final document that made Jessica whistle in amazement. "Your mother also prepared a comprehensive will amendment that she filed with the state attorney general's office, but never told your father about. This amendment specifically addresses what should happen if Richard attempted to defraud you of your inheritance." The amendment was devastating in its clarity. If Dad was ever found guilty of embezzling from Blackwood Construction or misrepresenting company ownership, his own inheritance from Mom would be revoked and transferred to me as well. This meant I would not just get my 51% back, I would inherit his 49% too, giving me complete ownership. "But the most beautiful part," Eleanor continued with a satisfied smile, "is that this amendment includes a provision for triple damages if he involved other family members in defrauding you. Uncle David's betrayal was not just morally wrong, it was legally catastrophic for both him and Dad." "Eleanor," I said, trying to process the magnitude of what Mom had done for me. "How do we move forward with this evidence? We file everything with the district attorney tomorrow morning. Between your mother's evidence and what you have gathered independently, this case is airtight. Your father will face multiple felony charges, and your uncle will be charged as an accessory." For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. My mother had not just left me a company. She had left me the tools to protect it from the people who would try to steal it. "But Sarah," Eleanor added seriously, "once we file these charges, there will be no going back. Your father and uncle will face prison time. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about my mother fighting cancer while secretly protecting me from family betrayal. I thought about walking down the aisle alone because Dad chose gambling debts over his daughter. I thought about 3 years of building my business while he stole my inheritance and lived comfortably off my mother's legacy. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I am ready to finish what my mother started." The next morning, Eleanor and Jessica filed a comprehensive criminal complaint with the district attorney that included every piece of evidence my mother had gathered, plus everything Marcus and Maria had documented over the past 2 weeks. By noon, warrants had been issued for both Dad and Uncle David's arrests. I was not there when they were taken into custody, but Maria called me with updates throughout the day. Dad was arrested at the Blackwood Construction office in front of all the remaining employees. Uncle David was picked up at his house while trying to shred documents that turned out to be additional evidence of his collaboration with Dad's schemes. The local news picked up the story by evening. Local construction company owner arrested for embezzling daughter's inheritance. The irony was not lost on reporters that the man who had stolen from his own child was being exposed just months after that same daughter had sold her business empire for hundreds of millions. Patricia was arrested 2 days later when investigators discovered she had been actively participating in the forgery of documents and had been receiving kickbacks from some of the fraudulent asset sales. Her consulting fees were actually payments for helping Dad hide money from creditors and tax authorities. The court froze all of Dad's personal assets and placed Blackwood Construction under emergency management while the legal proceedings continued. I was officially recognized as the majority owner and given immediate control of all business operations. Within a week, I had rehired Maria as general manager and brought back the 2 experienced project managers Dad had fired. The company's reputation in the industry had been damaged by Dad's cost-cutting and corner-cutting, but the core business was still sound. Marcus took a leave of absence from his firm to help me restructure the company's finances and implement proper oversight systems. We discovered that Dad had been systematically underbidding contracts and then trying to make up the difference by using substandard materials and underpaying workers. Fixing these practices would take time, but it was necessary to restore the Blackwood name. The most satisfying moment came 3 months later during Dad's sentencing hearing. The judge had reviewed all the evidence, including my mother's pre-death investigation and the testimony from multiple witnesses about Dad's gambling addiction and systematic fraud. "Mr. Blackwood," the judge said sternly, "you did not just steal money from a business. You stole from your own daughter during one of the most difficult periods of her life while she was grieving the loss of her mother and struggling to build her own career. You violated the trust placed in you by your deceased wife, who clearly anticipated your potential for this kind of betrayal." Dad was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for embezzlement fraud and tax evasion. Uncle David received 4 years for his role as an accessory and for helping to obstruct the investigation. Patricia got 3 years for fraud and forgery. But the real victory was not seeing them punished. It was seeing Blackwood Construction restored to what my mother had envisioned. I spent 6 months learning the business and implementing changes that honored both the company's legacy and modern standards for ethical operations. We paid back wages to workers who had been shortchanged, completed projects using quality materials, even when it meant operating at a loss, and rebuilt relationships with suppliers and subcontractors who had been burned by Dad's practices. Once the company was stable and profitable again, I made the decision to sell it to Maria and the other long-term employees through an employee stock ownership plan. They had been the real heart of Blackwood Construction all along, and they deserved to control their own futures. The sale provided me with enough additional capital to start a foundation in my mother's memory, focused on supporting women entrepreneurs in the hospitality and construction industries. Every year, we provide scholarships, mentorship, and seed funding to women who are building businesses without family support or resources. Marcus and I also use some of the money to buy a beautiful property in Vermont, where we are building our own family home using sustainable practices and local contractors. We plan to raise our children with clear values about family loyalty, personal integrity, and the difference between blood relationships and chosen family. The chosen family we have built includes Eleanor, who has become like a grandmother to me and continues to provide legal guidance for the foundation. Maria visits regularly and has become one of my closest friends and business advisors. Even some of the reporters who covered the story have stayed in touch and become allies in promoting women's entrepreneurship. I learned that real family is not about sharing DNA or inherited obligations. Real family is about people who show up for you during difficult times, who celebrate your successes without trying to claim credit, and who protect your interests even when it costs them something personally. The foundation has already helped launch 12 successful businesses, and we are expanding our programs every year. Every time I meet with a young woman who reminds me of myself, struggling to build something meaningful while dealing with family drama or financial obstacles, I think about my mother and the incredible gift she gave me by protecting my future, even while she was fighting for her life. Dad sends letters from prison occasionally, usually around holidays or my birthday. They are filled with apologies and requests for visits or financial help with commissary expenses. I do not respond to them. Some people might think that makes me unforgiving or cruel. But I have learned that forgiveness does not require ongoing relationship with people who have proven they cannot be trusted. The most important lesson from this whole experience is that justice is not always immediate, but it is often inevitable if you are willing to fight for it strategically and with the right support. My mother fought for me before she died. Eleanor fought for me when I needed legal protection, and Marcus and Maria fought alongside me when I needed allies. If you are dealing with family betrayal or financial manipulation, please know that you do not have to accept it just because someone shares your last name. Document everything, seek professional help, and remember that your success is the best revenge against people who try to steal your future. Have any of you experienced family members who suddenly became interested in your success after years of ignoring or undermining you? How did you handle the balance between protecting yourself and maintaining family relationships? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we are not alone in these struggles makes all the difference. If this story resonated with you, Please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama and building the life you deserve. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that family betrayal is not the end of your story. It can be the beginning of building something even better. Thank you for listening to my journey from family rejection to justice served. Remember, sometimes the family that chooses you is stronger than the family you were born into, and your mother's love can protect you even after she is gone.